Have you ever felt completely insignificant, like there's no way you could ever be used for something great? If so, you're in good company. Today, we're diving into a powerful moment in the life of a man who felt just the same way. A man named Gideon. At this point in history, Israel is in a desperate situation. For 7 long years, the Midianites have been ravaging their land, stealing their crops, and driving them into hiding in mountains and caves. Every time the Israelites plant, the Midianites swarm in like locusts and destroy everything. It's a cycle of oppression and fear. The people of God cry out for a deliverer, and God hears them. But who does God choose? A mighty warrior? A king? No. He sends his angel to a young man named Gideon, who is secretly threshing wheat in a winepress. Think about that for a second. A winepress is a pit, a confined space. He's threshing wheat there to hide it from the Midianites. This isn't an act of bravery, it's an act of survival born out of fear. And it's here, in this place of hiding and anxiety, that the angel of the Lord appears and says something almost comical, if it weren't so profound. The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor. Gideon must have looked around, thinking, who, me? The guy hiding in a hole? You must be mistaken. His response is so human, so relatable. It's filled with doubt and a little bit of sass. He says, "Oh my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about?" He's essentially saying, I've heard the stories of God's power, but I don't see it. All I see is our suffering. It's a raw, honest complaint from a man at his wit's end. He feels abandoned. He can't reconcile the stories of a powerful God with the reality of his people's oppression. But the Lord doesn't rebuke him for his doubt. Instead, he gives him a command. Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you? Again, Gideon is flawed. This might of mine? What might? He points out his reality. Oh my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. He sees himself as the smallest person from the weakest family in a minor tribe. In his own eyes, he is a nobody. This is a critical moment. God doesn't choose the qualified. He qualifies the chosen. God sees not who Gideon is, but who he will make him to be. Gideon's weakness is the perfect canvas for God to display his strength. Still, Gideon needs a sign. He needs proof that this isn't just a dream or his imagination running wild. He asks the angel to wait while he prepares an offering. This isn't just a quick snack. It's an act of worship and a test. He prepares a young goat and unleavened bread from a whole measure of flour, a significant meal, a genuine sacrifice. He brings the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot. He's putting his resources on the line. Gideon presents this meal to the angel, who instructs him to lay the meat and the bread on a rock and pour out the broth. This is a strange request. You don't typically pour broth over a meal you're serving. But Gideon obeys. He's stepping out in faith, even in his uncertainty. Then, the moment of truth. The angel of the Lord reaches out with the staff in his hand and touches the meat and the unleavened bread. Instantly, fire flashes up from the rock and completely consumes the offering. And just as suddenly as the fire appeared, the angel of the Lord vanishes from his sight. The sign is undeniable. This was no ordinary messenger. This was a divine encounter. The fire wasn't man-made, it was supernatural. The offering wasn't just eaten, it was consumed by holy fire, a clear sign of God's acceptance and power. And what is Gideon's reaction? Is it celebration, excitement? No, it's pure heart-stopping terror. The Bible tells us he cries out, "Alas, O Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." Why is he so afraid? In ancient belief, seeing God or his direct angelic representative face to face meant certain death. No mortal could withstand the pure holiness and power of the divine and live. In that moment, Gideon realizes the full weight of who he's been talking to. He's been complaining to, questioning, and bargaining with a messenger straight from the throne of God. The reality of it all crashes down on him, and he believes his life is over. But then, in the midst of Gideon's terror, comes a voice of profound comfort. The Lord himself speaks to him, saying, "Peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die." 3 incredible assurances in one sentence. First, peace, the opposite of the chaos and fear Gideon has known his whole life. Second, a direct command, do not fear, the antidote to the terror gripping his heart. And third, a promise of life, you shall not die. This counters the very belief that was causing his panic. This encounter transforms Gideon. He goes from a man paralyzed by fear to one who has received a direct word of peace from God. In response, he builds an altar right there on that spot. He names it, "The Lord is Peace." This isn't just a pile of rocks. It's a permanent memorial. It's a declaration for himself and for everyone else that even in a land torn apart by war and fear, it is possible to find peace in the presence of the Lord. From this point on, Gideon is a changed man. He's still got challenges ahead, and he'll even ask for more signs later on. But this moment, this face-to-face encounter with God as messenger and the subsequent word of peace, is the turning point. It's the moment the fearful farmer begins his journey to becoming the mighty man of valor that God called him. The story of Gideon's calling is a powerful reminder for all of us. We may feel weak, insignificant, or hidden away in our own wine presses of fear and anxiety. We may look at the world around us and, like Gideon, ask, "Where are the miracles?" But God meets us right where we are. He doesn't wait for us to be perfect or brave. He chooses the weak to shame the strong, and his power is made perfect in our weakness. And when we encounter him, his first word to us is not condemnation for our doubts, but peace. Thank you so much for joining me for this story today. If this message resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into these incredible accounts. Have you ever felt completely overlooked, hidden away, trying to survive in a world that feels like it's crashing down around you? Imagine this. You're in ancient Israel, a time of fear and oppression. For 7 long years, the Midianites have been like a plague of locusts, swarming the land, destroying crops and stealing livestock. The Israelites are driven into hiding, seeking refuge in dens, caves, and mountain strongholds. It's a desperate time. In the midst of this chaos, we find a young man named Gideon, but he's not on a battlefield or leading a rebellion. No, we find him in a wine press. A wine press. It's a pit dug into the ground, a place for crushing grapes, not for threshing wheat. But Gideon is there, secretly, beating out a small amount of grain, hoping to hide it from the marauding Midianites. He's just trying to get by, to feed his family, to remain invisible. He's defined not by courage, but by caution. He's doing what he has to do, but his heart is heavy with the question that haunts his people: where is God in all this? Suddenly, as Gideon works in the shadows of the winepress, a figure appears. It's an angel of the Lord. And the angel's first words are utterly shocking, almost sarcastic given the situation. He looks at this fearful man, hiding in a hole, and declares, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Mighty man of valor. Gideon must have looked around, thinking the angel was talking to someone else. Him, a hero. He was the opposite of a hero. He was scared, hiding, and full of doubt. So he responds not with faith, but with raw, honest frustration. He pours out the bitterness that has been building in his heart. "Oh, my Lord," he says, "if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. You can feel the pain in his words. It's the cry of a person who has heard stories of a great and powerful God, but sees no evidence of him in his own life. It's a question many of us have asked in our darkest moments. God, if you're real, if you're good, why is my life falling apart? Gideon isn't being disrespectful. He's being real. He's bringing his honest doubts directly to God. And how does the angel respond to this outburst of doubt and despair? With rebuke? With judgment? No. The angel looks past Gideon's fear, past his doubt, and sees the potential God placed within him. The angel doesn't answer Gideon's why. Instead, he gives him a what. The Lord turns to him and says, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" Think about that. Go in this might of yours. What might? The might of a man hiding in a winepress? The strength of a doubter? The power of a fearful farmer? No. God wasn't talking about Gideon's strength. He was telling Gideon to go in the strength he had just received, the strength of God's own presence and calling. The fact that God showed up, the fact that God was sending him, that was the might he was supposed to go in. God wasn't asking Gideon to be a hero on his own. He was inviting Gideon to be a vessel for God's own power. This story is incredible because it shows us that God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He doesn't look for perfect heroes. He finds ordinary people in their hidden places of fear and speaks an extraordinary destiny over them. He meets us in our winepress moments, in our doubts and frustrations, and says, "I am with you. Now go. I will be your strength." Gideon's journey from a fearful thresher to a mighty warrior began with an honest conversation with God. And maybe that's where our journey begins too. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that dives deep into these timeless tales. A moment that completely transformed a man from a doubter into a leader. We're talking about Gideon and his face-to-face meeting with the angel of the Lord. So let's set the scene. The Israelites are in a tough spot, oppressed by the Midianites. They're hiding, they're scared, and they're desperate for a sign of hope. And who does God choose? Not a king, not a general, but Gideon, a man who's literally hiding from his enemies, threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it safe. He's full of doubt and feels completely unqualified. Then, out of nowhere, the angel of the Lord appears and calls him a mighty man of valor. Gideon's reaction is basically, "Who, me? If God is with us, why is all this bad stuff happening?" He's honest, he's questioning, and he represents that part of all of us that struggles to see God's plan when things are difficult. But the angel is patient. He commissions Gideon to save Israel. Gideon, still skeptical, asks for a sign. This is where it gets really interesting. He says, "If I have found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who talk with me. Please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you." Gideon isn't just asking for a little nod or a gentle breeze. He goes and prepares an entire meal, a young goat and unleavened bread. This wasn't a quick snack. This was a significant, respectful act of hospitality and worship. He brings the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot and presents it to the angel, who is waiting patiently under an oak tree. The angel then gives him a simple instruction: take the meat and the unleavened cakes and lay them on this rock and pour out the broth. Gideon obeys, probably wondering what's going to happen next. He's arranged this offering on a natural stone altar, pouring the broth over it all. And then comes the moment of truth. The angel of the Lord reaches out with the staff in his hand and simply touches the meat and the bread. Instantly, fire flashes up from the rock and completely consumes the offering. Every last bit of it is gone in a blaze of divine power, and just as suddenly as the fire appeared, the angel of the Lord vanishes from his sight. Can you imagine witnessing that? In a single, silent, fiery moment, all of Gideon's doubts are burned away. The natural world is suspended as supernatural fire erupts from a stone. This isn't a normal fire, this is a sign directly from God, confirming that this messenger is no mere man. The offering has been accepted in the most dramatic way possible. Gideon's reaction is pure, unfiltered awe and terror. He falls to the ground and cries out, "Alas, O Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." In that culture, it was believed that no one could see God and live. Gideon is convinced his life is over. He has seen the unveiled holiness of heaven, and it has undone him. But right in that moment of fear, God speaks to him directly. "Peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die." This is the ultimate reassurance. God doesn't just show his power. He follows it up immediately with his grace and peace. He meets Gideon's terror with comfort. In response, Gideon builds an altar right there and calls it "The Lord is Peace." This story is so incredible because it shows us that it's okay to have questions. It's okay to ask God for a sign, but when he shows up, be ready. His power is real, his presence is awe-inspiring, and his peace is always there to catch us when we fall. Gideon went from a man hiding in a winepress to a leader who would change the course of his nation, all because of this one fiery encounter. What a powerful reminder that God can meet us right where we are, in the middle of our doubts, and show us a glimpse of his glory. Thanks so much for joining me for this story today. If this blessed you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the incredible events of the Bible. Have you ever felt like you're just not the right person for the job? Like you're too small, too weak, or just not qualified for the huge task God has placed in front of you? If so, you're in good company. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of a man named Gideon, a man who felt just like that, but who God used in a mighty way. It's a story about tearing down old idols to make way for true faith. We find Gideon in the book of Judges, chapter 6. Israel is in a tough spot. For 7 years, they've been oppressed by the Midianites. Every time they plant their crops, the Midianites sweep in like a swarm of locusts and take everything. The people are hiding in caves, they're impoverished, and they're desperate. In this moment of crisis, they finally cry out to the Lord, and God answers, but not in the way they might have expected. An angel of the Lord appears to Gideon, who is secretly threshing wheat in a winepress, a hiding spot to keep it from the Midianites. And what does the angel say? "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Mighty warrior. Gideon must have looked around. "Me? You must be mistaken." His response is so relatable. He says, "Pardon me, my Lord, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about?" He's full of doubt. He feels abandoned. He points out that his clan is the weakest in his tribe, and he's the least important person in his family. Sound familiar? How often do we disqualify ourselves before we even start? We look at our own limitations instead of God's limitless power. But God doesn't see what Gideon sees. God sees a mighty warrior, and he gives Gideon a direct command. "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" God isn't asking Gideon to conjure up some new strength he doesn't possess. He's telling him to use the strength he already has, because God himself is the one sending him. After a miraculous sign involving a fire consuming an offering, Gideon is convinced. He builds an altar to the Lord right there. But this is just the beginning. God has a much bigger, much more public task for him. That very night the Lord tells him to do something radical. He says, "Take your father's bull, the second bull, the one 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." Now let's pause and think about how huge this is. This wasn't some random public altar in the town square. This was his father's altar. It was on his family's property. Baal was the popular Canaanite god of storms and fertility, and the Asherah pole represented a goddess. These were the idols the Israelites had turned to, the very reason for their suffering. God was telling Gideon to start the revolution right in his own backyard. He had to confront the sin that was closest to home. This is a powerful lesson for us. Sometimes the idols we need to tear down aren't out there somewhere. They're in our own homes, in our own hearts, in our own families. They are the things we've allowed to take God's place, our comfort, our traditions, our reputation, even our family's approval. Cleaning house for God starts with our house. Gideon understands the danger. He knows that if he does this in broad daylight, the townspeople will be furious. He's afraid. But here's the key. His fear didn't stop him from obeying. The Bible says he was too afraid to do it by day, so he did it at night. He took 10 of his servants, and under the cover of darkness, they did exactly what God commanded. They tore down the altar to Baal, chopped down the Asherah pole, and then they did something even bolder. They used the wood from the idolatrous pole as fuel for a fire on a brand new altar, and they sacrificed the bull to the one true God. He replaced the symbol of rebellion with an act of worship. Imagine the scene the next morning. The men of the town get up, ready to go about their day, perhaps to pay their respects at the altar of Baal. But it's gone, demolished, and in its place is a new altar, still smoking from a sacrifice to the Lord. There's an immediate uproar. People are furious. Who did this? They demand. After a quick investigation, the finger points straight at Gideon. The mob descends on Gideon's house. They go to his father, Joash, and say, "Bring out your son. He must die, because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. They are ready to execute him for offending their false god." This is the moment of truth. Gideon's obedience has put his life on the line. Will his own father turn him over to the angry mob? This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Joash, the owner of the demolished altar, steps forward to face the crowd, and he says something brilliant. He asks them, "Are you going to plead Baal's case? Are you trying to save him?" Then he delivers the final blow. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. Wow, the logic is undeniable. If Baal is so powerful, why does he need a mob of angry villagers to fight his battles for him? A true God can take care of himself. In that moment, Joash not only saves his son's life, but also exposes the powerlessness of the idol they had all been worshipping. The crowd is silenced. They have no answer. The threat dissolves. From that day on, Gideon gets a new name, Jerubbaal, which means "let Baal contend with him." His act of courage, done in fear and trembling, not only sparked a revival, but also gave him a new identity. He went from being the least in his father's house to the man who publicly challenged a false god and won. This story is packed with so much for us today. First, it shows us that God often calls the unlikely. He doesn't look for perfect, fearless heroes. He looks for willing hearts. Gideon was full of fear and doubt, but he obeyed anyway. Your feelings of inadequacy don't disqualify you from being used by God. Second, true revival often begins by tearing down idols. What are the altars to Baal in our lives? What are the things we run to for security, for meaning, for help, instead of God? It could be money, success, relationships, or even just our own comfort and reputation. God calls us, like Gideon, to have the courage to tear them down, even if it's unpopular, even if it's scary. And third, when we step out in obedience for God, He will defend us. Gideon was facing a lynch mob, but God used his own father to deliver a powerful word that silenced the crowd. We may face opposition when we stand for truth, but we are never alone. God is our defender. So what is God asking you to tear down today? What altar in your life needs to be replaced with a place of true worship? Maybe it's a secret habit, a compromised value, or a relationship that's pulling you away from Him. Like Gideon, you might be afraid. That's okay. Take a few trusted friends, do it in the night if you have to, but take that step of obedience, because on the other side of that fear is a new identity and a new purpose, orchestrated by the God who sees a mighty warrior even when all you see is weakness. Thank you so much for watching. If this story encouraged you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed, like you're facing an army of problems all by yourself? Imagine an entire valley, as far as the eye can see, filled with enemies. That's exactly what Gideon saw. The Midianites and Amalekites had gathered, a massive force ready for battle. They swarmed the Jezreel valley like a plague of locusts, and all of Israel was terrified. In this moment of crisis, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. He took a deep breath, raised a ram's horn to his lips, and blew a powerful blast. The sound echoed through the hills, a call to arms, a signal of desperate hope. And the people responded. Men from Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali heard the call and began to gather, rallying behind this unlikely leader. But as Gideon looked at the growing crowd of his countrymen and then back at the endless sea of enemy tents, a seed of doubt began to sprout in his heart. Was this really God's will? Was he, a man from the weakest clan, truly the one chosen to save Israel? The weight of it all was crushing. He needed a sign. He needed absolute certainty. So, in a moment of raw honesty, Gideon spoke to God. He said, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I am laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand." It was a bold request, a test of God's power and patience. The next morning, Gideon woke up before the sun. His heart pounded as he walked to the threshing floor. He knelt down. The ground around the fleece was bone dry, just as he had asked. He reached out a trembling hand and picked up the wool. It was sopping wet, soaked with dew. He squeezed it, and a whole bowlful of water poured out. God had answered. But even with this incredible sign, Gideon's fear lingered. Was it just a fluke, a natural phenomenon? His human mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. So, he went back to God one more time. He pleaded, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. This time, please let the fleece be dry and let the ground all around it be covered with dew." Gideon was asking for the impossible, a reversal of nature. It's one thing for a sponge-like fleece to collect moisture, but for it to remain perfectly dry while the ground around it is wet, that would defy all logic. He was pushing the limits, but God, in his incredible grace and understanding, was not angry. He knew the fear in Gideon's heart. The next morning came. With bated breath, Gideon returned to the threshing floor. He looked down, and his eyes widened in disbelief. The ground was glistening, covered in a thick layer of morning dew. But the fleece of wool in the center was completely, miraculously dry. There was no room left for doubt. God had confirmed his will in the most undeniable way. Gideon was ready. His fear was replaced with faith, ready to lead Israel into one of the most astonishing victories in history. This story shows us that it's okay to have doubts and fears. Even the greatest heroes of faith struggled. What matters is that we bring those doubts to God. He is patient, he is understanding, and he is powerful enough to give us the assurance we need. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed, like you're standing at the foot of a mountain that seems impossible to climb? You know you're supposed to do something big, something important, but a tiny voice of doubt inside whispers, "Can I really do this? Am I the right person for this?" If you've ever felt that way, then the story of Gideon is for you. Imagine this. The entire land is gripped by fear. For years, every time the harvest is ready, enemy armies, the Midianites and the Amalekites, swarm in like a plague of locusts. They sweep through the valleys, destroying crops, stealing livestock, and leaving nothing but despair in their wake. The people of Israel are forced to hide in caves and mountain strongholds, living in constant terror. It's a dark, desperate time. In the middle of all this chaos, we find a man named Gideon, and he's not exactly what you'd call a typical hero. When we first meet him, he's threshing wheat in secret, hiding in a winepress to avoid being seen by the enemy. He's not a king, not a general, just an ordinary man from the smallest clan of his tribe, trying to survive. But then, something extraordinary happens. An angel of the Lord appears to Gideon and says, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon's reaction is probably what yours or mine would be. He's confused. "Mighty warrior, are you talking to me? If God is with us, why is all this terrible stuff happening?" He's full of questions, full of doubt. He feels forgotten and powerless. Yet God sees something in Gideon that Gideon can't see in himself. He sees a leader. God gives him a mission. "Go in the strength you have and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Am I not sending you?" Gideon, bless his heart, is still not convinced. He lists all the reasons why he's the wrong guy for the job. "Pardon me, my lord," he says, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." He's basically saying, "You've got the wrong number, God. I'm a nobody." But God's response is simple and powerful. "I will be with you." With this divine push, Gideon takes his first shaky steps of obedience. He tears down the local altars to false gods, an act of defiance that enrages his own townspeople. But this one act of courage begins to change everything. Word starts to spread. And then the moment of truth arrives. The Midianites, the Amalekites, and all their allies gather for their annual raid. The scripture says they camped in the valley of Jezreel. This isn't just a small raiding party. It's a massive, intimidating army, described as being as numerous as sand on the seashore. The valley is filled with their tents, their camels, their warriors, ready to consume everything in their path. The threat is real, it's immense, and it's right on their doorstep. In this critical moment, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Gideon. Something shifts inside him. He picks up a shofar, a ram's horn trumpet, and blows a powerful blast that echoes through the hills. It's a call to arms, a signal of defiance that hasn't been heard in years. And miraculously, people respond. Men from his own tribe and the neighboring tribes of Asher, Zebulun and Naphtali begin to gather. A small army is forming around this unlikely leader. Now put yourself in Gideon's sandals. Just a short while ago, you were hiding in a winepress. Now you're looking at a growing but still small group of volunteer soldiers. And across the valley, you see an enemy force so vast it darkens the horizon. The weight of it all must have been crushing. The initial rush of adrenaline from blowing the trumpet fades, and that old familiar feeling creeps back in. Doubt. Is this really you, God? Am I hearing you right? Are you sure you want me, little old me, to lead these people against that? This is where the story gets incredibly relatable. Gideon needs one more confirmation. He needs a sign. He's not being rebellious. He's being honest. He is about to risk not only his own life, but the lives of every man who has answered his call. He has to be absolutely sure. So he comes up with a test, a very specific, very unusual test. He goes to God and says, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." Think about the physics of this for a moment. Wool naturally absorbs moisture from the air. If there's any dew at all, you'd expect the fleece to be wet. For the ground to be bone dry while the fleece is soaked is a bit unusual, but maybe possible. It's a humble, specific request. Gideon lays the fleece out on the threshing floor, the very place where his journey started, and he waits through the night. The next morning, he gets up early, his heart probably pounding in his chest. He goes to the threshing floor and he sees it. The ground all around the fleece is completely dry, not a drop of moisture. He picks up the fleece, and it's so saturated with dew that when he squeezes it, he wrings out a whole bowl full of water. The sign is clear. God has answered. Most of us would stop there, right? We'd say, okay, message received, let's go. But Gideon is a world-class doubter. He is just like us. The sheer size of the enemy army is still staring him in the face. A part of him still wonders, was that a fluke? A weird atmospheric condition? A 1 in a million chance? He needs to be 1000% certain. He has to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this is the hand of God. So he goes back to God, almost apologetically. Do not be angry with me, he says. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece, but this time make the fleece dry and let the ground be covered with dew. Now, this request is even more audacious. This goes against the laws of nature. A wool fleece staying perfectly dry while the ground all around it is soaked with morning dew. That's not just unusual, that's scientifically backwards. There's no natural explanation for that. It would be an undeniable supernatural sign. Gideon is laying his deepest anxieties bare before God. He's not pretending to be a fearless hero. He's admitting his fear and asking for help. And how does God respond? With anger? With frustration? No. God responds with patience and grace. He understands Gideon's human frailty. That night, God does as Gideon asks. When Gideon comes to the threshing floor the next morning, he witnesses a miracle. The grass, the dirt, the entire ground is wet, glistening with dew. But when he picks up the fleece of wool, it is completely, utterly dry. In that moment, everything changes for Gideon. His doubt is washed away. His fear is replaced by a resolute faith. He now knows with every fiber of his being that God is with him and that victory is assured, not because of his own strength or the size of his army, but because of the power of God. This beautiful, simple story of the fleece teaches us so much. It shows us that God doesn't demand perfect, fearless faith from us. He meets us right where we are, in the middle of our doubts and insecurities. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to ask for assurance. What matters is that we bring our doubts to him, instead of letting them drive us away from him. Gideon's fleece wasn't a tool to manipulate God. It was a bridge for his own wavering faith. And God, in his incredible patience, walked across that bridge to meet him. From this point on, Gideon is a changed man, ready to follow God's plan, no matter how crazy it seems. And trust me, God's plan is about to get even crazier. But that's a story for next time. What fleece are you putting before God today? What impossible situation are you facing where you need his clear confirmation? Remember, Gideon, be honest with God about your fears and watch how he patiently and powerfully shows you that he is with you. Thanks so much for watching and sharing this journey with us. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next part of Gideon's incredible adventure. Ever felt like you're facing a giant? Like the odds are so stacked against you that winning seems absolutely impossible? Today, we're diving into a story about a man who was in that exact spot, a man named Gideon. He was leading a tiny army of just 300 men against an enemy force so vast, the Bible describes them as being like locusts in abundance. Their camels were as countless as the sand on the seashore. Imagine that. You're standing on a hill, looking down at a valley swarming with enemies, and you've got a force that could barely fill a small school hall. What would you be thinking? Fear, doubt, maybe a little bit of, what have I gotten myself into? Gideon was probably feeling all of that and more, but this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. God had a plan, and it wasn't about conventional warfare. He had already whittled Gideon's army down from 32,000 to a mere 300. Why? To show that this victory wouldn't be won by human strength, but by divine power. Yet God, in his incredible understanding of human nature, knew that Gideon, despite his faith, needed one final boost of courage. He needed a sign that this wasn't some crazy, doomed mission. So God tells Gideon, "If you are afraid to go down, go with Purah your servant to the camp." It's a moment of incredible grace. God doesn't scold Gideon for his fear. Instead, he provides a way for him to find reassurance. So, under the cloak of darkness, Gideon and his servant Purah creep down the hillside. Can you feel the tension? Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig could give them away. They're not just sneaking near the enemy camp, they're going right to the edge of it, into the lion's den. They inch closer and closer until they can hear the murmurs of the Midianite soldiers. The air is thick with the smell of campfires and the sound of thousands of sleeping warriors. Gideon and Purah press themselves against the ground, their hearts pounding in their chests. They are listening, just as God told them to. And that's when they overhear a conversation that will change everything. One Midianite soldier is telling his friend about a dream he just had. Now, dreams in the ancient world were often seen as omens or messages from the divine. This wasn't just idle chatter. The soldier says, "Behold, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came unto a tent, and smote it, that it fell, and overturned it, that the tent lay along." It sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? A rogue loaf of bread causing such destruction. What could it possibly mean? Let's break this down. Barley bread was the food of the poor, the common, the insignificant. It was what you ate when you couldn't afford wheat. It represented something lowly and humble. The tent, on the other hand, represented the established, powerful force of the Midianites. So the dream is about something small and seemingly insignificant, completely demolishing something large and powerful. It's a perfect metaphor for Gideon's 300 men against the mighty Midianite army, but it's the friend's interpretation that hits with the force of a thunderclap. Without a moment's hesitation, the other soldier replies, "This is nothing else save the sword of Gideon the son of Joash, a man of Israel, for into his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host." Stop and think about that. This isn't one of Gideon's men trying to pump him up. This isn't even a neutral observer. This is the enemy. An enemy soldier in the dead of night is prophesying his own army's defeat at the hands of Gideon. He doesn't just name Gideon. He explicitly says that God has given Midian into his hand. Can you imagine what Gideon must have felt hearing those words? It was the ultimate confirmation. The fear, the doubt, it must have all melted away in that instant, replaced by a surge of unshakable confidence. God didn't just give him a vague sign. He allowed Gideon to hear his victory declared from the mouth of his enemy. It was a secret message, delivered in the dark, meant just for him. This wasn't about military strategy anymore. It was about stepping into a victory that was already declared. When Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, the Bible says he worshipped. Right there on the edge of the enemy camp, in the most dangerous place he could possibly be, his first reaction was to bow down and worship God. That single act tells you everything you need to know about the transformation that just took place in his heart. The scared farmer was gone, and in his place stood a confident general, ready to carry out God's plan. He immediately returned to his own camp, his voice ringing with newfound authority. He woke his 300 men, not with a speech about fighting hard, but with a declaration of faith. "Arise, for the Lord hath delivered into your hand the host of Midian." The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. It was time for action. This story is so powerful because it reminds us that our perspective can be our biggest battlefield. Gideon was looking at the size of the enemy, but God wanted him to see the size of his God. That secret mission into the enemy camp wasn't just for intelligence gathering, it was for heart strengthening. It was a divine appointment designed to silence the voice of fear and amplify the voice of faith. Sometimes when we're facing our own Midianite armies, whether it's a difficult situation at work, a personal struggle, or a challenge that feels insurmountable, we can feel like that small loaf of barley bread. Insignificant, weak, and powerless. But this story teaches us that in God's hands, the small and the humble can topple the great and the mighty. It's a reminder that our victory doesn't depend on our own strength or resources, but on His power and His promises. What dream do we need to overhear? What confirmation are we waiting for? Perhaps, like Gideon, we just need to listen closely. God often speaks in unexpected ways, through unexpected sources, to give us the courage we need to move forward. He understood Gideon's fear, and He understands ours too. He is willing to meet us in our moment of doubt and give us exactly what we need to trust Him fully. The story of Gideon's nighttime visit is a beautiful picture of God's personal, compassionate, and powerful way of leading His people to victory. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this incredible story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into these timeless narratives. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible stories of all time. A story that proves it's not about the size of your army, but the size of your faith. It's the story of Gideon and his 300 men. Imagine this. The nation of Israel is being crushed by the Midianites. For 7 long years, these invaders have swarmed their land like locusts, stealing their crops, destroying their livelihoods, and forcing them to hide in caves and mountains. Israel is at its breaking point, crying out for a savior. And in this moment of desperation, an angel of the Lord appears to a man named Gideon. Now, Gideon isn't a king or a famous general. He's just a regular guy, hiding from the Midianites while threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it safe. When the angel calls him a mighty warrior, Gideon's reaction is probably what yours or mine would be. He's like, "Who, me? If God is with us, why is all this happening? I'm from the weakest clan, and I'm the least in my family." He's filled with doubt and insecurity. Does that sound familiar? How often do we disqualify ourselves before we even start? But God sees something in Gideon that Gideon doesn't see in himself. God reassures him, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." To build his faith, God gives Gideon a series of signs. First, fire from a rock consumes Gideon's offering. Then, Gideon asks for a sign with a fleece of wool, first for the fleece to be wet with dew while the ground is dry, and then for the fleece to be dry while the ground is wet. Both times, God patiently provides the proof Gideon needs. God meets us where we are, even in our moments of doubt. So Gideon starts to believe. He gathers an army, and it's a big one. 32,000 men answer the call. Okay, now we're talking. 32,000 men against the massive Midianite army. The odds are still tough, but at least it's a fighting chance, right? Wrong. God tells Gideon, "You have too many men." Too many? What? God explains that if they win with such a large army, the people of Israel will boast that they saved themselves, forgetting it was God's power that gave them the victory. God wants to make it absolutely undeniably clear who is in charge. So the first cut is made. Gideon announces that anyone who is afraid can go home. And you know what? 22,000 men pack their bags and leave. Just like that, the army shrinks from 32,000 to 10,000. Imagine watching 2/3 of your force just walk away. The fear Gideon must have felt. But he trusts God. 10,000 men left. That's still a decent number. But God looks at Gideon and says, "There are still too many." This is where it gets really interesting. God tells Gideon to take the men down to the water to drink. He gives him a bizarre instruction. Separate them based on how they drink. Picture the scene. Most of the men get down on their knees, put their faces right in the water, and drink like a dog. But a small group, just 300 of them, stay alert. They cup the water in their hands and lap it to their mouths, keeping their eyes up, watching their surroundings. God tells Gideon, "With the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home." From 32,000 to 10,000, and now down to just 300. 300 men against an army described as being as thick as locusts, with camels as numerous as the sand on the seashore. The odds have gone from bad to worse to utterly impossible. This is no longer a military strategy, it's a divine one. Now, God knows Gideon is probably terrified. So, he gives him one more boost of encouragement. He tells Gideon to sneak down to the Midianite camp that night with his servant. As they approach, they overhear two Midianite soldiers talking. One is telling the other about a strange dream he had. He dreamt that a loaf of barley bread came tumbling into their camp and struck a tent so hard that it collapsed. His friend immediately interprets the dream, saying, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." Can you imagine Gideon's reaction? He hears the enemy predicting their own defeat, all because of a dream about a loaf of bread. This is all the confirmation he needs. He bows in worship, his fear replaced with unshakable confidence. Gideon returns to his 300 men, his heart on fire. He says, "Get up. The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." Now it's time for the battle plan. And if you thought the army selection process was weird, wait until you hear the weapons of choice. Gideon doesn't hand out swords or shields or spears. He gives each of his 300 men a trumpet, an empty clay jar, and a torch to hide inside the jar. That's it. Trumpets, torches, and pottery. This is the most unconventional battle plan in history. It makes no logical sense. But Gideon isn't relying on logic anymore. He's relying on God. Under the cover of darkness, Gideon divides his men into 3 companies of 100. They silently surround the massive Midianite camp. They wait for the signal. The tension must have been unbearable. Then, at Gideon's command, in the dead of night, the impossible happens. All at once, the 300 men blow their trumpets. They smash their clay jars, revealing the blazing torches, and together, in one unified voice that must have echoed through the valley like thunder, they shout, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon!" Imagine the scene in the Midianite camp. They are jolted awake by the deafening blast of 300 trumpets, the crashing of pottery, and the sudden appearance of 300 points of light surrounding them on all sides. In their sleepy confusion, they think they're being attacked by a massive, overwhelming army. Panic and chaos erupt. They start shouting and running in every direction. In the darkness and confusion, they can't tell friend from foe. The Midianite soldiers turn on each other, and the entire camp descends into a frenzy of self-destruction. The victory begins not with a swing of a sword from an Israelite, but with the sound of a trumpet and the shout of faith. The Midianites basically defeat themselves, fleeing in terror as Gideon's 300 men simply hold their positions, holding up their torches and blowing their trumpets. It was a victory won through obedience, faith, and a strategy that could only have come from God. This story is so powerful because it reminds us that God's ways are not our ways. When we feel weak, outnumbered, and unqualified, that's often when God can do his most incredible work through us. He chose Gideon, the fearful farmer. He chose the 300 men who stayed alert, and he chose trumpets and torches over swords and shields so that no one could ever doubt where the victory came from. So what's the Midianite army in your life? What feels impossible? Remember, Gideon, God may be asking you to trust him with a strategy that seems crazy. He might be asking you to face your giant with nothing but a trumpet and a torch. But if you are willing to obey, to have faith even when it makes no sense, you will see the sword of the Lord fight for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. If this story encouraged you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores these amazing accounts of faith. In our last session, we witnessed an incredible moment in history. Gideon, with just 300 men, armed with nothing but trumpets, torches, and clay jars, sent the entire Midianite army into a panicked, self-destructive frenzy. It was a stunning victory, a testament to what faith and a clever strategy can achieve. But the battle was far from over. The Midianite forces, though disoriented and terrified, were now scattered and fleeing for their lives. The real chase was just beginning. Imagine the scene: chaos under the moonlight. The valley, once filled with the enemy's tents, is now a scene of utter confusion. The Midianites are running, not just from Gideon's small band, but from each other. In the darkness, they can't tell friend from foe. But Gideon knows that allowing them to escape would mean they could regroup, rally, and return to terrorize Israel another day. This couldn't be a one-night victory. It had to be a decisive, final blow. He needed to cut off their escape route. So, what does he do? He can't be everywhere at once. His 300 men are exhausted, having been on high alert all day and night. Gideon makes a crucial strategic decision. He sends messengers racing through the hill country of Ephraim. The tribe of Ephraim was one of the largest and most powerful in Israel. They hadn't been part of the initial 300, but their territory was strategically located. The fleeing Midianites would have to pass through their lands to cross the Jordan River and get back to their home territory. The message Gideon sent was urgent and direct. Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them, as far as Beth-bara. Essentially, he was asking them to set up a roadblock. He was telling the men of Ephraim, the enemy is running right towards you. Don't let them cross the river. Intercept them. This was a call to action, a chance for the rest of Israel to join in and complete the victory that God had initiated. It was a brilliant move, turning a chase into a massive, coordinated trap. The men of Ephraim responded immediately. They didn't hesitate. They mustered their forces and rushed to the key strategic points along the Jordan River. They effectively created a bottleneck, a choke point that the fleeing Midianite soldiers would have to run straight into. The Midianites, desperate to get to the safety of the other side of the river, were completely unaware that another Israelite army was waiting for them. They were running from one threat directly into the jaws of another. This is where the story takes another dramatic turn. Among the thousands of fleeing Midianites were their leaders, the princes who had orchestrated the years of oppression against Israel. Two of these princes were named Oreb and Zeb. Think about their names for a moment. In Hebrew, Oreb means raven and Zeb means wolf. These weren't just names, they were titles that likely reflected their predatory and ruthless nature. These were the men who had plundered Israel's harvests, stolen their livestock, and driven them into hiding in caves. They were the embodiment of the enemy's cruelty. As the scattered Midianite forces frantically tried to cross the Jordan, they were met by the waiting army of Ephraim. A fierce battle erupted at the riverbanks. The tired, demoralized Midianites were no match for the fresh, determined Ephraimites. It was a rout, and in the midst of this clash, the men of Ephraim captured the two princes, Oreb and Zeb. The hunters had become the hunted. The wolves and ravens that had preyed on Israel were now trapped. The capture of these two leaders was a massive symbolic victory. It wasn't just about eliminating enemy commanders, it was about bringing justice. The Bible tells us that the men of Ephraim executed them, and the places where they were executed were forever named after them. Judges 7:25 says, They slew Oreb upon the rock Oreb, and Zeb they slew at the winepress of Zeb. These locations became permanent memorials, not to honor the princes, but to remember the moment of deliverance. Imagine people passing by that rock for generations afterward, pointing and saying, "That is the rock of the raven, where God's judgment fell upon our oppressor." The same for the winepress, the very symbols of Israel's agricultural life. A winepress became the site of justice against those who had tried to destroy it. After this decisive action, the men of Ephraim brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was on the other side of the Jordan, still in hot pursuit of the remaining Midianite kings. This act was more than just presenting trophies of war. It was a declaration. We have done our part. The threat from these two is over. Justice has been served. It was a powerful moment of unity and shared victory. The tribe that was called in late had proven their worth and secured a critical part of the triumph. However, this moment also sets the stage for a new conflict. A conflict not with the enemy, but within Israel itself. When the men of Ephraim meet Gideon, they aren't just bringing him prizes of war, they're also bringing a complaint, an accusation that will test Gideon's leadership in a completely new way. We'll explore that tense confrontation in our next video. It's a fascinating look at the internal politics and tribal jealousies that often arise, even in moments of great victory. The story of Oreb and Zeb is a powerful reminder that victory isn't just about a single heroic moment. It's about follow-through, strategy, and community. Gideon's humility in calling for help and the Ephraimites' swift response were just as crucial as the trumpets and torches. It shows that deliverance is a team effort. The raven and the wolf were defeated, not by one man, but by a nation that, for a moment, came together under God's guidance to secure their freedom. It's a powerful lesson in unity, justice, and the importance of finishing the job. Thank you so much for joining me for this part of Gideon's incredible journey. It's a story with so many layers, and we're just getting started on the aftermath of this great battle. If you're finding this series insightful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world and helps us continue to explore these amazing stories together. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode, where we'll see how Gideon handles a challenge from his own people. He was the hero of the hour, the man God raised up to deliver Israel from oppression. The people were so grateful, so ecstatic, that they came to him with an offer that was both understandable and deeply problematic. They said, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." Now, on the surface, this sounds like a great reward, right? They wanted to make him king, but Gideon, to his credit, remembered who was truly in charge. His response was pitch perfect. He told them, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." What a statement! He deflected the glory, pointed everyone back to God, and affirmed that Israel's true king was Yahweh himself. It seems like Gideon has passed the test with flying colors. He's a humble, God-fearing leader. The story should end here, with everyone living happily ever after under God's rule. But it doesn't. In fact, what happens next is a tragic twist that serves as a powerful warning for all of us. Right after this incredible declaration of faith, Gideon makes a request. It seems simple enough. He says, "Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil." The Israelites had just taken a massive amount of loot from the defeated Midianites, including a lot of gold jewelry. The people are more than happy to oblige. They spread out a garment, and everyone throws in the golden earrings they had captured. The total weight of the gold comes to 1,700 shekels. That's about 43 pounds, or nearly 20 kilograms of solid gold. Plus, there were other treasures, crescents, pendants, and the purple garments of the Midianite kings. This was an immense fortune. So what does Gideon do with all this gold? The Bible tells us in Judges chapter 8, verse 27, Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city in Ophrah. And this is where the story takes a dark turn. What is an ephod? In the Bible, an ephod was a special sleeveless garment worn by the high priest. It was part of the sacred vestments described in the book of Exodus, intricately woven with gold, blue, purple, and scarlet yarns. The high priest wore it when he ministered before the Lord in the tabernacle. It was a holy item associated with seeking God's will. So Gideon builds this golden ephod. But why? The Bible doesn't explicitly state his motive, and this is where we have to read between the lines. Was his intention good? Perhaps. Maybe he wanted to create a memorial, a tangible reminder of the great victory God had given them. Maybe, since the official tabernacle and the high priest were far away in Shiloh, he wanted to create a local center for worship, a place where people in his hometown of Ophrah could feel close to God. It's possible he thought he was doing a good thing, a religious thing. He had just turned down a crown, so maybe he saw this as a more spiritual role for himself. He wasn't a king, but maybe he could be a kind of local priest. But here's the critical lesson: good intentions are not enough. God had already given very specific instructions about how he was to be worshipped. He designated one place for sacrifice, one high priest, and one set of holy garments. By creating his own ephod and setting it up in his own town, Gideon was, whether he realized it or not, creating an alternative system of worship. He was decentralizing what God had centralized. He was taking a piece of God's prescribed religion and reshaping it to fit his own context, his own town, his own leadership. And the result was immediate and catastrophic. The verse continues right after saying he set up the ephod in Ophrah with this chilling statement, "And all Israel whored after it there." That's incredibly strong language. The word whored is a term the Old Testament frequently uses for idolatry. It signifies spiritual unfaithfulness. Israel was in a covenant relationship with God, like a marriage. By turning to this ephod, they were cheating on God. They were committing spiritual adultery. The very thing Gideon made, perhaps to honor God, became the instrument of their downfall. The ephod became a snare. Instead of being a symbol that pointed people to God, it became an object of worship itself. People didn't travel to Ophrah to remember the God who gave them victory. They traveled to Ophrah to see and venerate the golden ephod that Gideon had made. The symbol replaced the substance. The creation replaced the creator. It's a classic pattern of idolatry. We take a good thing, a victory, a leader, a religious object, a tradition, and we elevate it to a place that only God should occupy. The tragedy deepens when we read the final part of the verse, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. Even the man who made it fell into the trap. Think about that. The hero who said, "The Lord will rule over you," ended up creating an idol that led his own family and the entire nation astray. This wasn't some pagan outsider. This was Israel's deliverer. It shows how subtle and deceptive the slide into idolatry can be. It often doesn't start with a conscious decision to worship a false god. It starts with a small compromise, a well-intentioned but misguided action, a human-centered attempt to control or localize our experience of God. Gideon's story is a powerful warning about the danger of souvenir religion. After a great spiritual experience or victory, we are often tempted to build a little monument to it. We try to capture the moment, to institutionalize the feeling. It could be a specific style of worship, a particular leader, a book, or even a theological system. These things can be good, but when we start to worship them, when our loyalty shifts from God to the ephod we've created, it becomes a snare. We stop following the living God and start polishing a golden memory. The story of Gideon's effort teaches us that even our greatest victories can contain the seeds of our worst failures. The moment of triumph is often the moment of greatest vulnerability. Pride, self-reliance, and the desire to control our own religious experience can creep in. Gideon won the war against the Midianites, but he lost the battle against a more subtle enemy: the temptation to supplement God's way with his own. He tried to help God out, and in doing so, he created a stumbling block for an entire generation. This story forces us to look at our own lives. What are our golden ephods? What good things have we elevated to a place of ultimate importance? Is it a pastor, a denomination, a political ideology, a particular spiritual practice? Anything that we look to for guidance, security, or identity apart from God himself can become an idol. The call for us, just as it was for ancient Israel, is to constantly return our focus to the one true King, to worship God alone in the way he has revealed, and to be wary of even the most beautiful, well-intentioned, golden distractions. Gideon's legacy is complicated. He is listed in Hebrews 11 as a hero of the faith, and he was. His faith at the threshing floor and his courage in battle are undeniable. But his story doesn't end there. It continues, reminding us that even the greatest heroes are flawed human beings in need of God's grace, and that a life of faith requires constant vigilance and a radical commitment to putting God, and God alone, first. Thanks so much for watching and thinking through this with me today. It's a challenging story, but one full of crucial wisdom for our walk with God. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Last time we witnessed the incredible story of Gideon, a man called from the threshing floor to lead Israel to a miraculous victory over the Midianites. With just 300 men, armed with trumpets, torches, and jars, they routed a massive army. But the story doesn't end with the battle's final cry. What happens after the dust settles? What does a hero do when the war is over? That's what we're diving into today. The 40 years of peace that followed and the final chapter of Gideon's life. So let's set the scene. The Midianite threat, which had oppressed Israel for 7 long years, was utterly crushed. Judges chapter 8 verse 28 gives us this incredible summary. Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more. Imagine the collective sigh of relief that swept across the land. For the first time in nearly a decade, families could plant their crops without fear of them being stolen. They could travel the roads without looking over their shoulders. This wasn't just a temporary ceasefire, it was a decisive, lasting peace. And the verse continues, "And the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon." 40 years. That's an entire generation. A child born at the end of the Midianite oppression would grow up, get married, and have children of their own, all under the umbrella of peace that Gideon's leadership had secured. This is a monumental achievement. In the cyclical, often chaotic world of the Judges, 40 years of unbroken peace is a golden age. It speaks volumes about the thoroughness of the victory and the stability that followed. Naturally, the people of Israel were overcome with gratitude and admiration for their deliverer. They come to Gideon with a proposal that's both understandable and deeply problematic. They say to him, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." They wanted to make him a king. They were ready to establish a hereditary monarchy, a dynasty of Gideon. On the surface, it seems like a fitting reward. He was the hero, the commander, the one who had brought them salvation. Why shouldn't he be their king? But Gideon's response here is perhaps his finest moment, even more so than the battle itself. He immediately and firmly refuses. He tells them, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." What an incredible statement of faith and humility in this moment of ultimate temptation, when he could have seized power, fame, and a legacy for his family. Gideon points everyone back to the true King of Israel, God. He understood that his victory wasn't his own. He was just an instrument in God's hand. He recognized that Israel's core identity was as a theocracy, a nation ruled directly by God, not by a human king. This was the ideal, the divine design. By refusing the crown, Gideon was attempting to keep Israel on the right path, reminding them of who was truly in charge. It's a powerful lesson for all of us. When we experience success or achieve something great, it's so easy to take the credit, to build our own little kingdom. Gideon's example challenges us to point the glory back to God, to acknowledge that our strengths, our victories, our very breath come from Him. But, as we're about to see, even the best of us can have a blind spot. Right after this magnificent refusal of kingship, Gideon makes a request. It seems innocent enough. He says, "Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil." Now, these weren't just any earrings. The Ishmaelites, who were part of the Midianite coalition, were known for wearing gold earrings. The soldiers of Israel had collected a massive amount of plunder from the defeated army, so they gladly gave Gideon a portion of the gold. The Bible tells us it was about 1,700 shekels of gold, which is a significant fortune, roughly 43 pounds of solid gold. So what does Gideon do with this mountain of treasure? Here's where the story takes a tragic turn. The scripture says he made an ephod out of it and put it in his hometown of Ophrah. Now, an ephod was a sacred vestment worn by the high priest. It was part of the official worship of God, kept in the tabernacle at Shiloh. By creating his own ephod, even if his intentions were good, perhaps as a memorial to the victory, Gideon was creating a rival object of worship. He was decentralizing and corrupting the very faith he had just defended. The consequence was immediate and devastating. The Bible says, "And all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family." That language is incredibly strong. The people began to worship this golden object instead of the God who had saved them. The very man who said, "The Lord will rule over you," created an idol that led the people astray. It became a snare, a trap, not just for the nation, but for Gideon himself and his own household. This single act planted a seed of idolatry that would have disastrous consequences after his death. It shows us how subtly compromise can enter our lives. One minute we can be standing for God with incredible conviction. The next, we can make a decision that, while seeming small, leads us and others down a path of spiritual ruin. Despite this major failing, the rest of Gideon's life was lived in apparent honor and peace. The Bible says he went and lived in his own house. He didn't build a palace or establish a royal court. He returned to a relatively private life. He also had a large family. We're told he had 70 sons, born of his many wives, which was a sign of wealth and prestige in that culture. He also had a son named Abimelech, born to his concubine in Shechem, a name we need to remember, as it becomes critically important later. So for 40 years, Israel has peace. Gideon, the mighty warrior, lives out his days, respected and honored, but with the shadow of his golden ephod looming over his legacy. Finally, the Bible tells us, Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash, his father, at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. He lived a long life and was given an honorable burial among his people. On the surface, it seems like a happy ending. The hero dies peacefully after bringing a generation of stability. But the final verses of Judges chapter 8 reveal the tragic truth. As soon as Gideon was dead, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals and made Baal-berith their god. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. And they did not show steadfast love to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. The moment he was gone, the peace he secured evaporated. The people's loyalty, which seemed to be to God but was actually just tied to Gideon, vanished. They immediately plunged back into the very idolatry they had been delivered from. They forgot God, and they even forgot the man God used to save them. The legacy of the ephod, the snare Gideon had created, came to full, bitter fruition. The 40 years of quiet were not a time of genuine spiritual revival, but merely a pause, a temporary peace dependent on the presence of one man. This final chapter of Gideon's life is a masterclass in contrasts. It's a story of incredible faith and baffling compromise, of profound humility and tragic pride. He refused a crown only to build an idol. He pointed people to God, then gave them a snare to trap them. He secured 40 years of peace for a nation that would forget him the moment he was gone. It's a sobering reminder that our walk with God is a marathon, not a sprint. A single victory, no matter how great, doesn't guarantee a faithful finish. We must guard against the subtle compromises that can undo all the good we've done. Gideon's story is a powerful, cautionary tale that echoes through the ages, reminding us to finish well and to ensure our legacy points not to ourselves, but only and always to God. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore the complex legacy of Gideon. It's a story that really makes you think, doesn't it? If this has resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next episode, where we'll see the horrifying consequences of Gideon's family life explode with his son, Abimelech. As always, thanks for watching.